Albert Breer, Monday Morning Quarterback, is joining us now live. So, I want to pose a question to you. I was really very reticent to embrace Brock Purdy. And then about 4 weeks ago, he had a game, and I thought, you know what, he's more mobile and athletic than I think. He tends to get leads because of Kyle Shanahan, distribution, good decisions. Playing with a lead in the NFL at halftime, you win about 65% of your games. I think, and I watched him last night against the two-time Pro Bowler Geno Smith, and he's a better player than Geno Smith, and everybody thinks Geno's pretty good. My takeaway is he's proven himself he'll get a contract. Your sourcing, what do you hear? Do you think he has another level to prove, or do you think, like, in-house, he's their guy going forward?
Well, let me just start with what I know, and then I'll tell you what I think. What I know is that they are planning on paying him after the year, and Kyle Shanahan said as much to me over the summer. We talked about how they build a team differently. He said we've been through that before. We went through it with Jimmy Garoppolo when Garoppolo became the highest paid quarterback in football. And so there was a real acknowledgement there that they are going to do this, and they do feel that confident. And they felt that way about him, Colin, going back to his rookie year. I mean, Kyle told me, like, based on the tape, like, this is the type of player he's going to be. And they really feel like he's becoming that type of player. Now, what I think is, like, what we're seeing over the last month is something we haven't seen before, which is the type of player that you need to have when you're putting him on that sort of contract, who's going to have to deal with some holes in the roster because you can't pay everybody. And so having to play without Christian McCaffrey, having to play without George Kittle, having to play without Deebo Samuel, having those guys come back from injury, then having to deal with Brandon Ayuk, who hadn't been out there all summer. There have been a lot of moving parts on the offense. Trent Williams wasn't even there during training camp. So just a lot of moving parts over the last 2 months, and nobody asked for any of that, and nobody asked for them to be 3-3 right now. But we've seen a guy who can go out and make plays on his own. You see the scramble plays. You see him churning out first downs with his legs. I'm not comparing him to Tom Brady, so don't get me wrong here. But I still remember at the beginning of Brady's career, because of where he was drafted, people were so reticent to put him on the same level as Peyton Manning. He got called a game manager. He's got a great coach, a great system, all of that different stuff. And we wound up finding out the truth in time. I don't think Brock Purdy's going to be Tom Brady. Again, don't get me wrong on that, but I do think there's that piece of it where a guy doesn't live down his draft position and people can't get over where he was drafted. Yeah. This guy's a really, really good player and a much better player than people have given him credit for.
Tony Romo and Kurt Warner were undrafted, so he's obviously good. So, listen, the idea that Woody Johnson and Aaron Rodgers talked and there was no, tip off of what was going to happen to Saleh, whatever. You have it better sourced, I'm sure, than me. I'm a little skeptical on that. But be that as it may, it does shift now with Nat Hackett being demoted. It does shift the responsibility on wins and losses to Aaron. You're not blaming the Hackett. Saleh's gone. You're not going to blame the interim coach. It doesn't look like they're going to get Devontae Adams right now. So my take is, okay, now it's Aaron's team. So as Aaron's team, we could talk about who they're going to hire as a coach. I'm not really interested. Here's my take going forward. I think Monday is the biggest game for Aaron Rodgers outside of that playoff game against Detroit, the biggest game in 2 or 3 years. Like, this is it. They win. This is Aaron's team. Do you feel going forward that the Saleh move is a plus, negative, or a minus? How do you think it plays out going forward?
Yeah, I kind of share the sentiment of a lot of people in that locker room. And I can just tell you, Saleh was loved in that locker room, and Rodgers loves him. I mean, Rodgers and Saleh, I'm told, were on the phone for a half hour with each other on Wednesday. Saleh spent a lot of time in the quarterback room over the summer and into the fall. So those two became closer. So I don't think there was a personal issue with Saleh and Rodgers, or Saleh and anyone in that locker room. The prevailing thought in that locker room was, what exactly is this going to accomplish? We have a great defense. You have the architect of that defense as your head coach. You've got a really good defensive coordinator in Jeff Ulbrich. And now you're pulling the head coach out of the equation, who, by the way, was going to make the switch in offensive play callers on his own before any of this happened. And you're elevating the defensive coordinator to head coach, so you're spreading him thin a little bit too. So that's the big question, is, like, where does this make us better? And I think those questions circulating inside that locker room make Monday a very big game for Aaron, for everyone else there, because this is the sort of spot where it's okay. We'll see if they get that bump from having an interim coach and from everybody being put on notice. It's a tough spot for everyone in that building to be in right now.
Yeah.
With Jeff Ulbrich changing roles, with a new offensive play caller and Todd Downing in his first game. And if they come out and look great, then maybe they'll be gangbusters the rest of the year. I sort of feel like if they don't, though, if Buffalo comes out and beats them by 2 touchdowns or 3 touchdowns, don't you sort of have the feeling like, what lever do we have left to pull now? Again, it's just a fascinating spot because this isn't typically the type of spot where you fire a coach in midseason, because generally those teams are either dead in the water or the coach has lost the locker room. And that just isn't the case with this team right now. Jeff Ulbricht's message to the team inside the building yesterday when they started their preparation for the Bills was that everybody has to lock arms and it's us against the world. Again, if they can't play that way on Monday night, I'm just not sure what lever they have left to pull after they pulled this one this week.
Okay, Drake Maye, there was a lot of consternation in New England. It looks like, okay, kid, Caleb, Jaden Daniels are playing, Bo Nix. I honestly, you know what I think, Albert? I think New England looked at Caleb's play. I think getting better. I think they looked at Jaden Daniels. I think they looked at Bo Nix and they thought, let's go. Those aren't perfect teams. I mean, there is some sort of, you could sit there and do the Jacoby Brissett thing and you would look really smart if Caleb, Jaden, and Bo Daniels were stinking the joint up. You in Atlanta would look brilliant. But there is something to be said about if the guy can play, That kind of, there's that outside peer pressure stuff.
I think this is actually more about the starter than it is about the rookie. You know why there's not pressure to play Michael Penix in Atlanta? Because they have Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins has a lot of skins on the wall. Ultimately, they had a development plan for Drake Maye, and he's come along great. Like, if you watched him in the preseason, from the first to the second to the third preseason game, there was progress week over week. He looked great in the preseason finale, against the Commanders. In practice, his footwork, his eyes, all that stuff is better. Over the last couple of weeks, the last piece, which is dealing with the blitz, has really come along. They've found creative ways to get him first-team reps. So all of that stuff is in place. I think they're playing him before they intended to, because I think it's become very clear in that building that he's now the best quarterback. Not just the most talented quarterback, but the best quarterback. And it's become harder and harder and harder through the losses to San Francisco, to Miami, to sell Jacoby Brissett as the best option to the locker room. Yeah. And I think that that's sort of where you're at right now. It's not hard for the Atlanta coaches to sell Kirk Cousins to the locker room. Everybody in that building knows what Kirk Cousins has accomplished. So that gives them the freedom to wait as long as they want with Michael Penix. Same deal as you had in Kansas City in 2017 when it was Mahomes behind Alex Smith, or in 2020 in Green Bay when you had Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers. The reality is that the Patriots don't have a veteran quarterback like that on the roster. And veterans on your roster don't care about your 3-year plan or your plan for developing the quarterback. Yeah. And when a team's struggling like this, it can become harder to sell a quarterback to the team. And I think that that's where the Patriots were when they made this decision. Yes, Drake was making a lot of progress. Yes, they believe in Drake. But I think they did this a little earlier than they had planned to, because Jacoby Brissett became harder to sell as the solution to that locker room.
Finally, either Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator for the Steelers, has no self-awareness or it was intentional. When asked about Justin Fields, he literally said, well, there's no drama. There's no, trying to make him, he doesn't live through his avatar on social media. And I just thought, whoa, that's not even subtle. So Pete Carroll wanted him out. Sean Payton publicly ripped him. And, Arthur Smith either has no self-awareness, I think he's a pretty smart guy, or, were you at least surprised by the lack of subtlety and nuance to the answer to, what do you think of Justin Fields?
I would be if I didn't know where the momentum in that building has been going for the last 6 weeks.
Okay.
And the momentum in that building has been stick with Justin Fields. He is loved by the coaching staff. He has made progress week over week. That Colts game showed them a lot a couple weeks ago, where he had to play from behind and they had to throw a lot. And his receivers didn't do him any favors late in that game. He didn't point any fingers. He just kept playing.
Yeah.
No, the game against the Cowboys wasn't ideal. And I don't think anybody would say that it was. It was played obviously under really weird circumstances, delayed, wet field, all of that different stuff.
Yeah.
But, what they see in Justin Fields is a guy that they can really work with. And I do think that they feel like there are some limitations to what they can do if they put Russell Wilson out there. And so I think they're viewing this not only on where the two players are right now, but where they're going to be in November, where they're going to be in December, and who's ultimately going to give them the best chance in January. And I can tell you this without equivocation, Colin. Arthur Smith and some of those coaches worked with Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, and they got to an AFC championship game with Ryan Tannehill. They feel like as a reclamation project, they can do more with Justin Fields than they could do with Ryan Tannehill. Again, I'm not talking about him becoming Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen, but they believe they can turn Justin Fields into a really good playoff-level quarterback. And right now, that might be more than they feel like they can do with Russell Wilson. So whether they give Russell a shot at it, which they might, they may throw him in there and see what he can do, gives them 2 cracks at it. I do think ultimately Justin Fields is going to wind up being the quarterback of the Steelers, whether it's through not giving Russell the job back or eventually giving the job back to Justin after giving Russell a crack at it.
Albert, have a great weekend. Monday Morning Quarterback, as always, great stuff. Can't wait. And thanks, bud.
Awesome. Thanks, Colin.
Hi, everybody. It's me, Uncle Colin. Subscribe here to get the latest from the herd, including exclusive behind-the-scenes videos and more, wherever you may be, however you may be watching. Thanks again for making us part of your day.